As much as I like doing the questions for atheists thing, I know that they're not being honestly asked. It's not a way to initiate a discussion, it's just a way for the religious to answer the questions in their heads the way that they've been brainwashed to think atheists would answer, so then they can just feel good about their beliefs and not learn anything. So, as much as this really is a waste of time, let's do it anyhow. I mean, what could go wrong? So, this comes from an opinion piece in The Christian Post from 2022. It's been sitting in my queue for a little bit, but I saw a couple of other people responding to it, so I decided to go and pull it out. It's 7 questions, ostensibly for atheists, although we know better than that because you don't post questions for atheists in a publication that's really only read by other Christians, do you? That seems rather disingenuous, doesn't it? But we'll take a look anyhow and answer his questions, even though the author doesn't care what atheists have to say. Because what else is new, right? So let's get to it. If you consider yourself an atheist today, or if you considered yourself an atheist in the past, I'd love to ask you some honest questions. And that's always how this starts, right? I'd like to ask you some questions, and then just leap to a ton of unwarranted, unjustified, asinine conclusions because you really like the idea. It's always, here's a bunch of really ignorant shit because I have no idea what atheism is, and I just want to push my blind faith. That is not impressive, sorry. You actually have to prove that it's real first, and you're not even trying. But let's continue. We just can't let ourselves get bogged down at the beginning because otherwise we won't get anywhere. But I do not ask these questions to win a debate, or to be antagonistic, or to buttress my own beliefs by exposing alleged weaknesses in your position. On the contrary, I ask these questions so I can better understand your mindset as an atheist. But see, that's kind of the problem. The only reason you should be asking these questions, whatever they are since we're not even there yet, is to convince people that your position is factually true. If you're not doing that, then you're just wasting everyone's time. The whole point of this needs to be, here's how I show you that what I'm saying is actually correct. And that never happens at all, does it? It's always a childish appeal to emotions or something similar. Granted, I can't just leap to that conclusion because, as I said, we haven't seen the questions yet. So let's just set that aside for the moment and see what comes next. When my wife Nancy and I met in 1974, I was a committed believer in Jesus, with my life dramatically transformed in 1971. She was a staunch atheist, looking down on religious believers as weak, and her atheism was firmly entrenched in her life, having concluded when she was no more than 8 years old that there was no such thing as God. Yes, it would have been great if he were real, but clearly, she concluded, he was not. For the record, Nancy and I are both Jewish. Okay, I don't really care about your story, and if it goes on past this, I'm just going to skip over it. And if you're interested, the link to the original article is down in the description so you can go look for yourself. But I'm not at all impressed with, I was a committed believer in Jesus. Yeah, you ought to be committed. I care how you can prove with objective evidence that Jesus is real. I don't care what you believe. I care what you can demonstrate. And sadly, the religious can never prove anything, can they? So your own personal life story means absolutely nothing to this discussion. I don't care where you're coming from. I care what you can back up with evidence. And I doubt we're going to get any evidence here. That doesn't seem like what he's setting up, but I guess we can hold out hope. Too bad our hopes are always dashed by the irrationality of the religious, right? Now, there was another paragraph in there that I just skipped over, but I left it on screen if you really want to read it for yourself. I don't care about your story, I care about the demonstrable truth. The simple fact that they just don't like is that there are atheists, period. In fact, I think there are a lot more atheists than anyone wants to admit to, including a large part of the religious population who don't really buy into this God nonsense. They just believe because it's safer for them to say they believe. The number of actual active believers is always pretty small, all things considered. However, we'll leave that alone for the moment and we'll just get on to his next paragraph. It is in that spirit of genuinely wanting to understand the atheist mindset better that I ask these questions. Then why are you asking it in the opinion section of the Christian Post? Something that presumably very few atheists read. I ask that question a lot though, don't I? All of these questions for atheists videos are asked in places that most atheists will never see them because they aren't really questions for atheists. They are questions for the religious who just invent their own answers that they think atheists might give based on their poor understanding of actual atheism. Because they just don't care. I don't know if they're not aware of how easily we can see right through their bullshit or not, but we can. That said though, since we know the religious don't give a damn about reality, let's get into the questions. They can't be as bad as I'm suspecting they are, right? Number 1. Would you say that you are or were an atheist based primarily on intellectual study or based on experience? Or did you never believe in God at all? Well, I did believe in God once upon a time, and then I got better. I never believed for good evidence-based reasons, only because I had been indoctrinated into the faith from childhood, and that's not a good reason to believe anything. Then, when I tried putting my faith to the test, fully convinced that I would wind up proving that Christianity was true, I did exactly the opposite and gave up the religious lies for demonstrable reality. So I guess I'm an atheist based almost entirely on intellectual study. The claims of Christianity and any other religion that I've ever studied, which is a lot, are not demonstrably true with objective evidence to back them up. Hence, there's no rational reason to believe. If there is no defensible reason to believe it, then you've got no reason whatsoever to believe it at all. And there's some more here, so let's look at that. Put another way, was it the lack of answers to prayers, failure with an organized religion, or some other anti-faith experience that first caused you to question the existence of God? Or was it something you learned at school or your studies that caused you to doubt it? Or were you raised without belief in God and you've never found a good reason to question it? Well, I've already answered that. There were no experiences that caused me to reject belief in God. There was no reason to think that any gods existed in the first place. Now, you notice what he's doing here, right? He can't imagine that anyone would take the time to do their own research and find that gods were not evidentially supported. It's, what did your teacher do to you to make you stop believing? Nothing. None of it came from my education. I went to all religious schools up until college level, and it wasn't them, it was me. I cared enough to go out and check it out for myself. I spent many hours of my life in university libraries looking for evidence, and I never came up with any. In fact, all I ever found were reasons to reject the empty claims of Christianity because they are not demonstrably true. In fact, they are demonstrably not true. If you care more about fact than you do about faith, which I still do to this very day, then you are not going to be fooled by the Christian scam, because that's all it really is. Number 2, would you say that even as an atheist, you still have a sense of purpose and destiny in your life, a feeling that you were put here for a reason and that you have a mission to accomplish? Or is it primarily people of faith who feel like this, since we are simply the products of an unguided random evolutionary process? Well, purpose? Sure, because I give myself purpose. I don't need some magical spook in the sky trying to tell me what to do. Destiny, though? No destiny, because that's stupid. I don't know if it's only the faith tards who feel that way, because I'm sure a lot of people don't. This is just another lie that some theists tell themselves because they desperately want to feel special. That's because they are desperate to make everyone just like they are.
One of us, okay? That's one of us. Gobble, gobble, one of us. We accept that one of us. Gobble, gobble, one of us. We accept that one of us. Gobble, gobble.
They're really uncomfortable with the idea that somewhere out there, someone might disagree with their asinine beliefs. Too bad. So I can come up with my own goals and my own purposes just like you can. If you're not an immature child looking for an imaginary father figure in the sky to tell you what the hell to go do with yourself. Because that's stupid. Number 3, would you say that you are 100% sure that there is no such being as God? By God, I mean an eternal, all-powerful, all-knowing being. Or would you say that for all practical purposes, you have concluded that this God does not exist, although it is impossible to prove such a negative with absolute certainty? All right, look, I am not absolutely certain of anything. I'm not 100% certain that I exist. There is no such thing as absolute certainty in anything. Welcome to reality. There is no evidence supporting a conclusion that any gods of any kind actually exist out there somewhere, and just believing that they do, that doesn't mean that they actually do, which is why you need evidence. I am convinced, for all practical intents, that there is no evidence for any God. At least I haven't seen any. And I've been challenging the religious for decades to produce anything that proves that their God is real, and they've all failed miserably. That's probably about as close as we're going to get to absolute certainty. I am not convinced that any God is now or has ever been real, and I would need to be convinced by objective evidence if I was ever going to believe it again. I think it's safe to say that the chances of me converting to any religion are vanishingly small. Now, I'm willing to be proven wrong, but based on what I know so far, I don't think it's going to happen. And that's the fault of the religious, not me. Number 4, do you believe that science can provide answers for many of the remaining mysteries of the universe, including how the universe began, including where matter came from and where the Big Bang derived its energy, the origin of life, and DNA coding? I don't know. Maybe, maybe not. But the real answer here is, who cares? I don't believe shit just because it makes me comfortable. That's idiotic. If we never figure out any of the answers to any of those questions, that doesn't make a God more reasonable. A thing exists or it doesn't, and your wishes and dreams and fifis, they don't matter at all, and I think that's where the religious tend to go wrong. Learn to embrace, I don't know, and deal with the reality as it actually is. When you know a thing, you know a thing. Just because you want to know doesn't mean that you do. Again, this is a problem with the religious. They're the ones behaving like immature children living in adult bodies. You have to grow up and learn to deal with the real world as it actually is, whether you like it or not. This is not all about you. That's an incredibly childish position to take, but a lot of them take it, don't they? Again, these questions are not intended to stump you or prove that science can't answer everything. Instead, I'm genuinely wondering if you'd feel comfortable saying, we may not be able to answer all those questions now, but over time we'll get the answers and we won't need to have a God to fill in the gaps. But nothing you've said remotely stumps me at all. In fact, it just reinforces why I think the religious have some serious emotional and intellectual problems. This is not how adult humans ought to look at the world. But I don't like it is just childish whining, and you really need to grow up and knock that off. But they can't do that, can they? They don't want to. They are terminally emotionally stunted by the religious mind poison that they've had shoved into their heads, and now they're just messed up. I'm not saying that they've necessarily done it to themselves, although I do think a lot of them have. Some of them are just victims. They've had this done to them. In the end, though, it doesn't matter because they are still responsible for what they allow to go through their heads. And if they can't ask the most basic rational questions and seek out truth over comfort, then they remain in that pathetic childlike state that makes them look really, really dumb. Because they are. Number 5. Have you ever had any experiences in life that caused you to question your atheism? Has something happened to you that seemed genuinely supernatural or otherworldly? Or have you been confronted with some information that shook your atheistic foundations, such as a scientific argument for intelligent design? If so, how have you dealt with such doubts to your atheism? All right, clearly he doesn't know what the hell atheism is. That's obvious up front. But to answer the question, nope, not a one. Then again, questioning your atheism, that's not even a coherent concept. We see once more that this guy has absolutely no clue who he's talking to because he isn't really talking to us. If he was, he wouldn't be publishing in the Christian Post. He doesn't care what we have to say. He's only talking to other Christians and encouraging them to make up their own answers in their heads that their equally distorted views of atheism will just fill in. Intelligent design is idiotic, as I've explained many, many times before. There is nothing pointing to any God of any kind in actual reality. It's all just made up so far as anyone can show. Just because you really like the idea, that doesn't mean anything. It means that you can't handle the world that you actually live in. And again, that's a you problem, not an us problem. And you really ought to be able to deal with it because it makes you look like a frickin' lunatic. Number 6. Are you completely materialistic in your mindset? Meaning human beings are entirely physical, human consciousness is an illusion, and there's no spiritual realm of any kind? Or are you superstitious, reading horoscopes, or engaging in New Age practices or the like? I am a methodological naturalist, meaning I follow the evidence to its most logical conclusion, and so far at least, the only thing that we have any evidence for is the natural. Humans are entirely physical. Human consciousness is an emergent property of the physical brain, and there is nothing identifiable as spiritual at all. If you'd like to produce evidence for any of that, feel free. I'm fine with that. But it's not the fifis that are going to matter. It's only the facts, and I think we all know that you don't have any. You are just not bright enough or mature enough to deal with the actual facts in this instance. And no, I don't believe in anything supernatural or superstitious because those words don't have any kind of rational meaning. Horoscopes are idiotic, and what kind of New Age woo-woo crap would you suggest? It's all dumb, and I'm not dumb. I just deal with the world that I'm demonstrably in. Maybe you ought to give that a try. Now we're up to the last one. Number 7. If you were convinced that God truly existed, meaning the God of the Bible, who is perfect in every way, full of justice and mercy, our Creator and our Redeemer, would that be good news or bad news? And would you be willing to follow him and honor him if he was truly God? And why exactly would I do that? If is still not because. I will be convinced only when there is sufficient direct demonstrable evidence to convince me, and sorry for your side, but you're not even close. In fact, every time you open your mouths, you just prove how utterly idiotic your beliefs actually are. This is something I don't think they truly understand, just how bad they look to everyone on the outside. They can try to share the good news all they want, but they're not impressing anyone with the brain. Granted, they're not after people with brains, are they? They just want the dumb and gullible ones that will sit in the pews and hand over their money and leave feeling all warm and fuzzy inside because some lunatic in a dress told stories from the pulpit. And that's not most atheists, at least not most rational atheists. The people who insist on evidence in support before they will even consider the proposition. Of course, that's why they're not talking to us, because we're not the ones that are likely reading the Christian Post, are we? So this guy is either lying to himself or lying to everyone else, because this isn't for atheists at all. It's for other Christians. Seriously, does he think we can't see right through this? Because I sure can. How about you? I understand that no two atheists are identical any more than any two believers are identical, and that everyone has their own unique story. I also understand that some of you who are believers today were once atheists, and that others who were once believers are atheists today. Okay, so what? Now, keep in mind, this is all being written by Dr. Michael Brown, and we've addressed him in the past. He is a complete imbecile, laughable in his ignorance, and resistant to all reason. It's not like he hasn't asked these questions before, or questions similar to this, and gotten his ass handed to him, because he has. He just doesn't care. This is why all apologists out there are such ludicrous jokes, because this is how virtually all of them operate. They have to. This is how they make a living after all, right? If you've got to lie to people for a buck, you've got problems. And Brown is one of the biggest liars for the Lord out there. And that's why I rarely ever do any of his videos, because it's just, well, I'm going to pretend to talk to atheists, but I'm really only talking to other Christians because they pay me. Now, there is a spot to post comments under this article, but I scrolled through it, and nowhere that I could see did Brown ever answer anything, because he doesn't care about talking to atheists. If he did, he'd engage with them, but he never does. So I just ran over to his YouTube channel looking for videos addressed to atheists, and I couldn't find any in the last year. I don't know, maybe he stopped doing that. Who knows? I then went into the comments on a couple of random videos of his, and I can't find a place where Brown has ever responded to anyone. Anyone. He's not in it to have a conversation. He's just telling people what they ought to think, because that's how religious con men like Brown operate. That is not something that anyone should be impressed by. I don't get why they are. So, there you go. 7 really stupid, pointless questions, not aimed at atheists at all, because he doesn't really want to understand. He's just trying to con the religiously gullible into giving him money and watching his videos and crap like that. He is not after the truth. I don't think he'd know the truth if it bit him in the face, because he doesn't actually care about the truth. It's really the kind of theist that I'm tired of making videos about. And what other kind is there? Let's be honest. I'm just not seeing many people worth responding to these days, because they're all doing the exact same thing, and none of it is rational or honest. They just really want to believe, or let's be honest, make other people believe so they can buy a new Mercedes and a third home. Some are certainly more transparent about it than others, but that's what all of them seem to be doing. They are conning the gullible for a buck, and how much should any of us respect that? Not at all. What other choices are there, though? Where are the better apologists, the better theists, theologians, anybody to respond to? Because I've been looking for years, and I haven't found one yet. I mean, maybe Randall Rouser once in a while, mostly because he's really critical of the religious con machine, but he's got no better evidence than anyone else, and it's the evidence that actually matters. If you have any ideas who I can go after that isn't just a blatant con man, I'd love to know down in the comments, because the blatant dishonesty is really getting to me lately. Help a guy out, okay?